On today's show, are the Dallas Mavericks looking for an option that's cheaper than Mitchell Robinson at center even? And is Kendall Brown the wing that the Mavs need to take a swing on in the draft? We'll talk about all that and more on today's Locked On Mavs.
I'm Luka Doncic, and this is Locked On Mavericks podcast.
Hey, Dallas Mavericks are NBA champions. Bang! Bang! It's good!
And the Mavericks have won the game!
If you don't believe, you shouldn't be here.
And welcome. You're locked on to the Dallas Mavericks. My name is Nick Angstadt, media member and NBA channel manager for the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for making Locked On Mavs your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. But the best way to help us grow the show is to comment anything below. Let us know what you think about Mitchell Robinson. Should the Mavericks go after Mitchell Robinson? If he costs $11 million, should they still go after him? Should they try something else? And what other options do you think the Mavs should go after? Let us know that. Also, today's episode is brought to you by Arcade 1-Up. Bring home a slam dunk. Introducing NBA Jam Shaq Edition. Pre-order now to play with Legends. Arcade 1-Up is the place for authentic gaming experiences featuring licensed retro games from the golden age of arcade. You're going to want to hear this one later in the show. We'll talk about all that, how you can enter to win a NBA Jam console for your house. And joining me, as always, my co-host, writer, and contributor at Mavs.com, the boom shakalaka boy, the one more thing king. What you got for me, Isaac Harris?
All right, big news today for me. I played first pickup game in like 6 months.
Wow.
It's been a bit. Ever since we moved, I lost my spot I used to play at. And I just went down to a local park, played outside, feeling it.
Hold on. For those that don't live in Dallas, Texas right now, you went outside and we have a heat advisory. It was 111 degrees the other day outside.
And I had to get some like lab work and stuff today at the doctor. So I was like,
yeah, because you were dehydrated and you passed out for playing pickup outside.
Honestly, we talked about dehydration at my doctor's appointment today. But all that to say, it was so good to get back playing. And I also want to say, if you live in like the mid cities area of Dallas, DFW, in like the HEB area, and you play indoor, get up in my DMs. I would love to play indoor somewhere. Yes, I would love to play in an air conditioned environment.
I would love to
play playing outside
indoor
today. Yeah, I'm feeling it though. It was good. It was good to get some buckets.
Insane. All right.
Not on Kuz level though. I'm not on Kuz level.
Kuka Hill, Locked On Pistons, may be our best basketball player on the Locked On NBA channel.
Or he's the only one who films it. He's like Willie Cauley-Stein. He'll film his like highlights, clip this and send it to Koo. He'll post his highlights of the game.
On today's show, there is a rumor. Oh, let's go. That the Mavericks are.
We saw Adele in the Bay. We didn't.
That the Mavs
she was at the game.
That's true. Anyway. She was. The Mavs are not going to go after Mitchell Robinson, and that they're looking at cheaper options at center. We'll also talk about their rumor that the Philadelphia 76ers are exploring options involving the 23rd pick and Danny Green. They need somebody with a trade exception. We got one of those. And then John Hollinger had his projections for free agents, which is his board, B-O-R-D. His board projection, Jalen Brunson's number may shock you later on. So we'll talk about that. And then we'll profile Kendall Brown, the wing from Baylor. Interesting prospect that I have a definitive answer on, not even doing much homework on him at all. And so we'll talk about that later in the show.
Just say he's a dynamic process.
Everybody's making fun of me for saying dynamic so much on the last show. That was the word of the day. Today's word of the day is cheaper. According to the New York Post, which is Berman, Mark Berman, that's his first name?
Yeah.
Knows all kinds of stuff about the Knicks. He's always posting sources about the Knicks. He's got some kind of in there. Said, quote, meanwhile, an NBA source said center-starved Dallas is not expected to be interested in Knicks center Mitchell Robinson at his hefty price tag of at least $11 million per year and have set their sights on cheaper free agent centers. Isaac Harris. First, what are your thoughts on Mitchell Robinson at $11 million, and what do you think about the Mavericks going after somebody cheaper than even that?
Well, first off, they don't have the money, so
that's the whole thing right there. That's most of it.
Yeah, so as soon as it said, hey, Mitchell Robinson, $11 million, I'm like, all right, well, whether they liked him or not, they don't have the cap to go to get him. So, I've seen some Mavs fans are like, what? We're not interested in Mitchell Robinson? I'm like, okay, well, there's a difference between saying we're not interested at all and we're not interested in him at 11 million because we don't have $11 million. So what it does tell me, though, if that is like the general consensus of Mavericks thinking, it does tell me it's like, hey, we're going the bullpen route and we're confident that we can get a difference maker down low for that mid-level exception or the taxpayer exception,
which is about $6 million. Which is what they're looking at. So unless they can convince Mitchell Robinson to go for about half of what he's going to get and say, hey, play a 1-year prove it deal, like unless they can convince him to do that, then Mitchell Robinson's just priced out. Now they could try and pull off a trade for him, say, would you do Dwight and 26 for Mitchell Robinson?
I don't know.
With a sign and trade?
I don't know.
Would you do Davis Bertans and like Mitchell Robinson plus, can they add something else to a sign and trade?
Yeah. Well, if it's that, then you're giving up money. It's just the fact that you're giving up the first and expiring of Dwight. You would be paying Mitchell Robinson, at least 10 to 12 million. Do you believe in him that much to be, I don't know. Maybe there's probably people listening that do believe in him that much.
I believe in him. I think he could be a really good option for the Mavs. I think that coming, especially since the Mavs have such a good track record of Knicks players coming to the Mavs now, just seems like there's like a pipeline of Knicks players. But
he could be a Tyson Chandler like starter kit.
Honestly, he could though. He's got all those tools, but he's like a bigger version of obviously of what Nerlens Noel was, but. He's got moves. He defends the rim well. Like he's a really good pick and roll guy. Like there's just some good potential with him. The problem is the Mavs can't afford that. And so they'd have to make a trade for him if he's going to demand that much money, unless they can convince him to do the $6 million man.
He's only made around $6 million total in his career in the first 4 years. Because remember, he's a second round pick. So typically I feel like these guys will lean towards the money to where, if New York's offering him a deal that's $11-12 million a year, multi-year, it's probably smart for him to take that money.
Yes, but imagine if you will.
Imagine
all the centers. Okay. Imagine though, he takes a 1-year deal, $6 million, a prove it deal to play next to Luka, definitely by far the best passer, best player, best point guard he's ever played with. He goes and he dominates. They win like a series or two. He's making a big impact, all that. And all of a sudden he hits next year as a free agent and makes like $20 million a year.
Yeah. I mean, that's a very realistic scenario for sure.
Did you hear that, Mitchell Robinson? That's a realistic scenario.
Yeah. And so, but if you're Dallas and you say, all right, well, why is Dallas looking at cheaper options? Then maybe this is where the connections come in. Maybe this is where the relationships that we hear about with Nico and everything that's thrown out there of Jason Kidd and players want to play for Jason Kidd. Is there a big out there that takes a discount? If it's not Mitchell Robinson, if he's going to make $11 million and that's what he wants, maybe Dallas is confident that they can get another big at that cheaper cost, the $6 million mark, and say, hey, come play with Luka in Dallas. And you start looking across the board and you're like, all right, who's some of these guys out there? Like, would Nurkic come to Dallas and play for $6 million? I don't know. Like that's a good like sacrifice of money right there.
Yeah.
Considered he made what? I think 12. Well, I could be wrong on that.
His contract was not. He did like a 4-year, $44 million, if I remember, deal like a while ago.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what he was making about. I got some other cheaper options for you. You ready for some of these?
Throw them at me. Don't say Whiteside.
Whiteside.
Mo Bamba.
JaVale McGee is one.
Okay.
That's a good one. He just played. Do you think Thomas Bryant would do a prove it deal?
Well, I feel like he is in the prove it range. Yeah.
For sure. Mo Bamba's a restricted free agent, so that one's tough.
I am fascinated to see what happens with Bamba.
But you could go after him.
Take Chet.
Dwayne Dedman.
Okay.
I don't know. That's not really moving the needle a ton. And then here's an interesting one that I know other Mavs YouTuber, slightly biased, has been talking about for a while is Isaiah Hartenstein. Isaiah Hartenstein pushed his way right past Serge Ibaka and was like, I'm going to be the backup center for this Clippers team. I was listening to Locked On Clippers, the Clipper Bros, for a while this year. They kept talking, we need more minutes for Hartenstein. We need more minutes for Hartenstein. They kept saying that over and over again. And he played pretty well. I feel like every time he played against the Mavs, he did well. He's 24 years old. He's an unrestricted free agent. $6 million for him. That's all of a sudden a good deal. And then, I don't know, is that the other option for the Mavericks?
But is he worth like the full $6? That's my only thing is I'm trying to look at guys like Kevon Looney. I'm trying to look at a guy like
he's way past. Looney's like, I didn't even write him down this time.
But that was the mindset I'm thinking of though. Is there a guy that we're like, hey, he's past 6 million, maybe he's at like 10, but the relationship of Nico and Jason Kidd and stuff's like, all right, come here and play this. We're going to be contending, whether it's a Bobby Portis, it's a Chris Boucher from Toronto. Is there a guy that's going to surprise us that takes that money?
I got a couple options for you in trades that'll be quote unquote cheaper than Mitchell Robinson, but also the Mavericks could acquire in a trade. So we'll talk about those guys coming up. Also, the Sixers are shopping the number 23 pick and Danny Green. He's going to be out for the year, but the Mavericks have a trade exception. Should they go after that kind of deal? We'll talk about that and more coming up. But before we do, oh, baby. You ready for this?
Oh, I'm so ready.
Boom, shakalaka. We have big news. The one and only NBA Jam is back. Arcade 1UP, the leader in home retro arcade games, not only bringing the best game ever back, but they've made it bigger than ever with a, wait for it, Shaq Edition. Edition NBA Jam. People are obsessed with NBA Jam. I've loved NBA Jam since I was a kid, and especially love the stand-up consoles. And you can get these for your house. You can get a stand-up NBA Jam console machine for your house, and it's not going to be thousands and thousands of dollars. I always thought that it would be thousands of dollars. I saw like Shea Serrano one time get one in his office, and I was so jealous. I was like, damn, that guy's doing really well. He's doing really well that he's getting that NBA Jam machine. And then I found Arcade 1UP when they became a sponsor. I started looking through their site and I said, this is possible. Like, I could get one of these. Like, I can buy one of these. You can get one at arcade1up.com. The Shaq Edition NBA Jam is available for pre-order right now on arcade1up.com. That's arcade, the number 1up.com for an estimated early September ship date. They have another NBA Jam, but they also have this Shaq Edition coming out soon. You can get all kinds of other classics too. Golden Tee, Mortal Kombat. They had an X-Men game. They have all kinds of different ones, many others, starting at just $400. $399. This is where some of these machines start with. So check it out. They're also giving away an NBA Jam Shaq Edition to one Locked On listener.
Oh.
Giving away. I actually think it's more than one, but the giving away to a Locked On listener. Enter for a chance to win.
Do you hear that?
Enter for a chance to win a game console for your man cave or your office, wherever. Arcade1up.com/lockedon. Arcade, the number 1up.com/lockedon. You got till July 8th to enter, but don't wait till then. Enter right now to get an NBA Jam Shaq Edition console. Don't miss now. Boom shakalaka. Who are you going to play with?
Dallas.
The ultimate NBA mock draft starts June 16th with over 50 insiders. Nothing equals the ultimate NBA mock draft podcast. You can get it on the ultimate mock draft feed, wherever you get your podcast. Odyssey insiders, NBA local experts from Locked On. Isaac and I made a trade. You're not going to want to miss the trade that we made with a team. Another Western Conference team.
We moved up in the draft.
Moved up. We did it.
And created some roster flexibility for later in the year.
Yes, we did. So go check it out. Starts June 16th. The ultimate NBA mock draft. Search it wherever you get your podcast. All right, Isaac Harris. We've been talking about this. That from the New York Post, that the Mavericks are not expected to be interested in Mitchell Robinson. He's going to cost about $11 million a year. They have their sights set on a cheaper free agent. So we've been talking about some cheaper ones. We talked about Mo Bamba, JaVale McGee, Isaiah Hartenstein. Couple of tradable guys. The guys that we mentioned before, obviously like Miles Turner. You can trade for him. He's more expensive. He's making $18 million, but it's like an expiring deal. So you could trade for him. We've talked about him a lot. You can go check out some of our other episodes about him. He's not necessarily cheaper, but Rashawn Holmes, I mentioned a trade with him last week in I think it was our Friday show, if you want to go listen to that. But I mentioned a trade for him that could be possible. A lot of people in the comments said, oh, I could see that deal happening. He is maybe played out of the rotation. He's making $11.2 million this upcoming year, $12 million next year, $12.8 the next year after that. So he's not necessarily cheaper, but he's right there in that range. The Mavs would have to trade for him, but that's an option.
Yeah. I like you threw out a deal on that trade up or that draft day trade, possibility is like Rashawn Holmes, one of their second round picks to move up to 26. And basically Dallas would like move from the first round to the second round, but pick up Holmes I think he can fit into the exception, right?
He can't fit in the exception, but they could
he can't.
They could send Burke if he picks up his option. They could send Sterling Brown. They could send Josh Green, and then all of a sudden you've made enough to where you can make it work. Now here's the three guys I think the Mavs could go after in a trade as a cheaper option. If this is a real rumor, the Mavs are going to go cheaper than $11 million. Jakob Poeltl from the Spurs, $9.4 million. He's an expiring deal. So that all of a sudden becomes an option for the Mavs if they want to make a trade. He could fit right in the trade exception. You send the 26th pick for Jakob Poeltl. Is that something you'd be interested in? The Mavs want to win now center?
I would be fascinated with how the fan base feels about that. Because I could be convinced either way on that one.
I'm in on that one.
I know you're in.
I'm in. I've been in on Poeltl. Every time I watch him play the Mavs, I've liked his rim protection, and I just think he's not the perfect center. He's not like the best rim runner. He's not the best at a bunch of other things, but defensively, he could help the Mavs. Zubats is another one that I think you've been in. He has a team option for $7 million next year, so that's an expiring deal. If the Clippers pick that up and decide they want to trade, they could just trade for the Mavs for the 26th pick and into the trade exception, and boom, all of a sudden you got a cheaper option than Mitchell Robinson, got it in a trade, and then all of a sudden you've got that taken care of. Daniel Gafford is my last one. This one's sneaky.
Yeah, he's fine.
This one's sneaky because he has a deal coming up where he'll be making $12.4 million, but that doesn't kick in until next season. So not like this upcoming season. This upcoming season, he only makes $1.9 million. So that's one of those where it could be a trade. You could get the center that has the same impact. Like him and Mitchell Robinson, toss up for me. I think Mitchell Robinson's better if he's more engaged and comes in shape. He came in out of shape this year, dealt with some foot things, but Daniel Gafford and him are right there. So those are some more center options. We'll talk about them more throughout the year, but we've talked about those guys before as well.
Yeah, especially because Wizards have a superstar in Porzingis that they're building around,
and they're not going to trade for Davis or Spencer Dinwiddie, so that limits the Mavs' options in a trade there. All right, according to Kevin O'Connor from The Ringer, the 76ers are, quote, exploring trades involving number 23 and Danny Green. Danny Green, if you remember playing for the Sixers, tore both his ACL and his LCL. That's a real thing. We're going to have to get Dr. Brian on to tell me what an LCL is. I'd never heard of that ligament.
Don't know what that is.
But he's going to be out for the year for sure. But he's a $10 million expiring contract. He's this $10 million contract that's just sitting there on the books for the Sixers. They're now exploring trades to try and get off that contract using the 23rd pick. Isaac, is this something the Mavs should look at? Because Danny Green fits right into that trade exception.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy for us to say yes just because we're not spending the money, the tax money.
It's not my money. I can do what I want to.
Yeah, so it's Mark's money. But, I mean, here's the thing. It's like if Philadelphia is legitimately saying, hey, we just want to save that money. We want to save the $10 million. We want to save it off our luxury tax bill too. We don't really need another rookie on their team. Here you go. Somebody take Danny Green. We'll just give you the 23rd pick. It feels like they wouldn't do that. But if they did, I think Dallas should pounce on it. Whether Danny Green plays, he's not going to play next year. One, it gives you another expiring contract that you can use in a future trade. We've seen like Ricky Rubio wasn't playing; his contract got used for a deal this past year. But also, it gives you the 23rd pick, to where now you have 23, you have 26. You could package that to move up if you want to go get a guy. Bring in 2 first rounders, make the trade 26 or trade 23 for Jakob Poeltl or whoever it is, and then you still have another first round. So I actually, Dallas is one of the few teams that would have the exception to just absorbing for nothing. So that would be a move. I'd be like, man, hats off to you, Nico. I like that.
You could get 2 first-round picks and then use them to move off of like Hardaway and Bertans, and then just create like a bunch of space in a couple years.
Yeah, you could do that.
You could do that.
We could move up for Tari Eason.
And what would this cost the Mavs? It would cost the Mavs a ton in luxury tax, right? Because they're adding $10 million, even though they're at this point of, I think they would even have to shed some money to make this deal happen because of the hard cap. But it would just basically, at the end of the day, they could make it happen, and Mark Cuban would just have to.
The wine.
And remember the exception it expires at the end of June. So it's like basically like right after their draft, the exception is going to expire.
Yeah, and so they couldn't. It's after the draft, so they could even do the exception. And if they wanted to swap picks and go from 26 to 23, if they wanted to do that,
yeah, I guess
it's not as good for the Mavs, but it's moving up 3 spots. Somebody they want is right there. It's an option for them. So this one's interesting. I find that really fascinating. Let's talk about Jalen Brunson here. Brunson is going to be a free agent. We all know this has been a big topic among Mavs fans. John Hollinger, former front office guy for the Memphis Grizzlies, and he's been working at ESPN. He's now at The Athletic. He has this algorithm called BORD, where he goes through and he says, okay, I'm going to punch in all these numbers, punch in all this stuff, and it's going to spit out what we think that this guy is going to make in free agency. And then he puts them in tiers, and then it shows up, okay, these are the guys making max, these are the guys in this range, these are the guys in this range. Jalen Brunson, Isaac Harris, came up in this board ranking, making $29 million next year.
It's a lot.
The wine.
He could buy a lot of wine.
What was your initial reaction when you heard when you read $29.371294 million for Jalen Brunson next year?
I was like, holy crap!
He's doing well. My son's doing well.
I mean, JB, get your money. If you can get that, then go get it on a personal. I mean, for Dallas, you got to pay it whatever it is. But man, that's a lot of money. That's a lot of money.
It's a ton. It's a ton. And coming up, let's talk about what that would mean for the Mavericks. Could they give him $29 million? Is that evaluation way too high? Why is it too high? And then what would it mean if he makes that instead of like $20 million a year? Talk about that coming up. And then we'll also do our draft profile for Kendall Brown, the wing out of Baylor. We'll talk about all that coming up. But before we do, let me tell you about RockAuto. With the ever-increasing number of makes and models of cars, it's impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts that you need. Why would you endure often pointless, seemingly intimidating questioning at the dealership, at the local chain store where there's a guy there making not enough money? He's annoyed. It's hot because it's Texas and he's outside and he's like, I don't want to deal with this anymore. And so he rips you off or whatever. Go to rockauto.com. They have the same prices for every single person. They have the same for mechanics. They have the same for do-it-yourselfers. Go check it out. They have everything you need: brake parts, tail lamps, motor oil, even new carpet. Go to rockauto.com right now. See all the parts available for your car or truck. Write Locked On in their How Did You Hear About Us box. They know that we sent you. It's amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. All right, Isaac, we've been talking about this story. I guess it's a story. John Hollinger wrote in The Athletic his BORD rankings, his board rankings, saying how much a player, it's an algorithm saying how much a player is going to make in free agency. Jalen Brunson came out of that algorithm at $29.3 million, which to me is way too much and way more than we've even heard him projected as. Mark Stein had that report recently that he was going to make, it was like 21.3 million was kind of Mark Stein's estimation of it. And so this is way more than that. According to John Hollinger, he said, quote, as a small guard coming off a career year, this board valuation is likely at the high end of where the league sees Brunson, but he should be able to get into the $25 million a year range.
Yeah. I mean, before the playoffs, I was like 18, 19. Now, obviously it's moved up. I still expect in that like 22 to 23 range. I mean, but here's the thing. It's like Dallas has to pay it. So like, there's just no other way around it. You're not letting him walk. You can't let him walk. Nope. You can't get into a game with it of like, all right, well, here's our stance. Go see what you can get. And like, give us a chance too. He's not restricted. So he can legit like, then if the Knicks make some crazy move super quick or on draft night or we just saw a trade over the past few days, JaMychal Green and that whole thing, and Denver picking up another first, and OKC using some of their, cap space. That was one of the teams that has cap space that could help some teams like Knicks create space. But I mean, Dallas has to pay it. So no matter what it is, it's part of it.
Hollinger said, he even mentioned the Knicks, like it'd be really hard for the Knicks to try and create enough space to be able to do a deal like this, or even a $25 million deal like what Brunson is probably going to get. But he said it would put the Mavs about $30 million over the luxury tax line and produce a whopping $85 million check to the league that Mark Cuban will have to dish out, and then all of a sudden he'll be hitting
the wine.
I think
it's the fourth one that gets me on that drop.
He'd be like, "Hey Theo, can you sit down now?" Like, I think I'll cut back on those fines now.
So that's interesting. Let us know in the comments what you think about Jalen Brunson and his valuation. We'll learn soon enough. July 1st, I'm guessing. This is when we'll probably figure out what he makes. So let's talk about Kendall Brown, the draft prospect from Baylor, the 6'7" 6'7" wing from Baylor, 6'11" wingspan, 200 pounds. He's going to be 19 years old at the time of the draft. The one sentence from NBA.com says, athletic forward with great quickness and remarkable leaping ability who made an instant impact on both ends at Baylor, but still has room to grow as a scorer and a stopper. The Ringer said, a high flyer who finishes everything above the rim, though he needs to progress as a shooter. Isaac Harris, what did you see from Kendall Brown at Baylor?
Well, one, he plays down the road, so I wonder if that, if the Mavs, watched him play, this past season with him playing at Baylor. But no, I mean, you naturally compare him to the other wings in this range of, the guys that we've been talking about. It looks like, as far as availability, different mocks, seeing all these people talk about it, it's like, all right, in the first round, maybe in the 30s. It's this 19-year-old kid, played one season at Baylor, super springy. He goes to the combine, 41-inch vertical. He's one of the top vertical numbers there as far as lane agility, all that stuff. Does well in all those drills and stuff. Like you said, he measured well, 6'7", 6'8", 6'11" wingspan. You watch him at Baylor. He's really good in transition. He's a really good cutter. Like, we talked about how good Wendell Moore is at cutting to the basket. Like, Kendall Brown's pretty dang good at cutting to the basket too, knowing when to cut, how he cuts to the basket. It's just outside of that, when you start comparing different wings, you start asking the question. It's like, when I look at wings, especially in this range, it's like, all right, how can you fit into the 3-and-D kind of like box, in the sense of like, how good are you at defense? How good are you at shooting? And like, where's your athleticism? He is a super springy pogo stick athlete. Like, he's going to throw it down, really fun in transition, great transition numbers. The shooting is kind of misleading in a sense of, like, he only had 41 attempts last year, 38 attempts, somewhere through there from three. It's kind of streaky. And even on defense too, the defense is a little inconsistent. It's a little streaky. I didn't watch every Baylor game, but reading all about it, watching some of the clips and looking at some of his synergy numbers, he doesn't have the best defensive metrics in the world, if you want to say that. So I'm really curious of if people are all in on him, especially with him being, Dallas. There's a lot of, Baylor Bear Mavs overlap in the Venn diagram. So
if you guys were listening on the podcast, Isaac did the, like, here's the church, there's the steeple, open the doors and there's no people thing.
I just found myself, the more I watch him, I could see how teams like, hey, let's swing for a 6'8" super athlete, like we'll bank on the shot and stuff. I just found myself liking some of the other wing prospects more than Kendall Brown.
This is a risk. And this is a risk that you start trying to figure out, okay, which players in the NBA are like him? You start trying to figure out, let's make some comps. The Ringer had like Grant Williams, which we don't think is a good comp.
Yeah,
you don't see that comp at all. And then you start, who are the other ones that the no ceilings draft guys had?
So yeah, the no ceilings guys had Juan Toscano Anderson. They had Aaron Gordon,
but
good. Then they had a great one in Gerald Wallace.
That's great. The problem is those guys just don't exist in the NBA right now. It's hard to find a comp for a super incredible athlete that can't really shoot, can't really handle the ball, isn't really that great on defense. Like, all of a sudden you're trying to box this guy into what's his role. It's just in transition. It's just like cutting, and that stuff is cool and all, but you have to be an incredible defender to be that role in the NBA. And so for that reason, I'm out to borrow the Shark Tank colloquialism.
And, so I was listening to, I tweeted out, a few days ago, but I was listening to Raphael, and friend of the pod,
Raphael Barlow, NBA Big Board.
Yeah. And I was listening to, one of the last, it was like players rising up the draft boards. It was last week. I think it was Friday's pod last week. And they were talking about Jake LaRavia, and they were talking about how, like, hey, he's skilled across the board, But the common thing, I'm like, wow, this is a subtweet at me right here. But he's like, the common thing about LaRavia is like he's skilled across the board, but he doesn't have a high ceiling. And I'm like, I literally said that. And
honestly, he may have gotten it from you. He's told me he listens to the pod.
But he was talking about like the stereotypes, and the problem with stereotypes sometimes is if a guy is super athletic and raw, then the common theme is, well, he has a lot of upside.
Yeah.
But if a guy is like skilled across the board and he's like polished, and it's like, well, okay, well, he has a low ceiling, but like the upside, I just don't know how much upside is there and I'm like, dude, I feel so like convicted in that because I'm like, I'm right there. Like I was saying that, and I fall into that trap sometimes. You think a guy like Jalen Brunson, I tweeted out that quote and somebody responded and was like, yeah, it's the same thing with Jalen Brunson, that he didn't, he doesn't have the athleticism, doesn't have some of this other stuff, but like he was so good across the board that he gets kind of overlooked. And we didn't hear the term upside and all of that with Jalen Brunson, but with some of these. So like, I think when you look at a guy like Kendall Brown, you look at the center matchup we did, back last week of Jalen Williams from Arkansas versus Christian Coloco from Arizona, that you could say, Christian Coloco, look at all this upside. But Jalen Williams, you're probably not talking about a lot of upside when he's really good at a lot of different things. So I don't know. I mean, this is me being parachute guy into the draft process, right after the season starts. But that's just kind of, I don't know how I feel about Kendall Brown and his role in the NBA, especially if his shot's not there. He's just a really athletic guy, kind of like would Gerald Wallace work in today's NBA? I don't know.
The thing about Gerald Wallace, though, is he was a good ball handler and he was a really good passer. Like he had that other stuff to his game that added, and he was an incredible defender, like incredible post defender, really good on the perimeter. Like he could do a bunch of other stuff. Now he was stuck with the Bobcats for a while and didn't really get to showcase it a lot, but like he had a lot of other skills to his game. Kendall Brown to me screams like Josh Jackson, Derek Williams, Wesley Johnson, like some of these guys that got drafted really high, because you look at their athletic profile, you say, oh, dang, this dude, if he adds these skills, like you were saying, if he adds these skills, then all of a sudden he could be an incredible player. He could do what Andrew Wiggins just did. Like athletically, he's just as good as Andrew Wiggins. And we just saw what Andrew Wiggins did in Game 5, the NBA Finals. But he doesn't have the skills of an Andrew Wiggins. The jump shot is not anywhere close to what Andrew Wiggins is.
This is setting it up perfectly for somebody that goes to Baylor that's going to be DMing us.
Jason Lippert. Jason Lippert is going to come right after me.
Somebody's going to write us The Hobbit in a DM and be like, you don't know what you're supposed to talk about.
I may not. And I'll be.
And I'm going to write back and tell you, go visit the Bears on campus. Okay. But no, I mean, he just, on paper, you're like 19-year-old, 6'8", 6'7", super athlete. We know, like, you get why he's staying in the draft. Some team will swing on him at the end of the first or in the first, but he seems like a 30s type of swing, second round swing for him there.
And that's where everybody has him. Raphael has him at 35. The Ringer had him at 33. ESPN mocked him at 34. The Athletic had him at 30. So like, we're not talking, I know I make all these comparisons like Josh Jackson, some of these guys that went top 5, top 10. He's not being mocked there. This is a flyer that you would take. This is a risk, which is why I started this with, he's a risk prospect. Like you take him with the thought of, okay, we're bringing this guy in. It's got great athleticism. If he can add a shot. Now he made 34% of his threes. He didn't take a ton of them, but he made a decent amount of his threes, and his shot is not terribly, it's not broken, right? It's not awful.
No.
Where you look at it and you go Ben Simmons. But he does have to add these skills, and it's hard to add these skills at the next level in the NBA, especially when it's defense, shooting, and ball handling. It's like all the three things that you need to add as a wing here. And so that's why it's interesting to me, and I don't think the Mavs should take him. They don't have the time to bring it around a guy like this. I'd much rather take a guy with either a ready-made shot or ready-made on defense. Like I'd rather have Beauchamp than him.
Yeah, me too. And that's why I'm not out on him. I just like a lot of the dudes around his range more.
But are you out on him for the Mavs?
It depends on who's on the board. Like that's the thing, which I think just by process of how many picks are for the Mavs, there's some of these other guys that we've talked about, Beauchamp, EJ Liddell, which Liddell will probably be gone.
Yeah.
Like there's just some of these other guys that I'm like, yeah, I like Wendell more than Kendall Brown. Like I just like some of these guys more than Kendall Brown. But it doesn't, like, for instance, if Dallas moved back, let's say they took the Orlando type of deal and said, hey, Orlando moves up, and then they get 2 picks in the 30s and they use one of those picks on Kendall Brown. Sure. Sweet. 6'8" springy guy you took a swing on.
Is it not the Tyler Bay, Tyrell Terry situation all over again if they do that? They just got to hit on one of those if they do that again.
I like both of those guys personally.
I did too. I like that.
It's hard for me to...
Besides the Sadiq Bey, Josh Green thing, we loved that draft.
I talked to both those dudes on the phone like the week that they got drafted, and I love talking with both those kids.
And yeah, I thought,
bummer.
Yeah, I thought at least one of them would hit, and it's hard for those second round guys to hit.
I was about Tyler Bay, man. I thought he would fit.
He had the mold. He just didn't have a shot, and it's kind of a very similar thing here.
Yeah. So that's Kendall Brown. I'm sure Waco people will tell us more about Kendall Brown.
Sick 'em Locked On Mavs hosts.
I will tell you this: the more I watched Kendall Brown tape film highlights, the more I like Jeremy Sohan. So because
that is a real niche draft joke you just made.
Well, no, I'm just saying he's going to the more I watch Baylor, I found myself saying, all right, well, I'm here to watch Kendall Brown. I'm not here to watch Sohan. So, and I was watching more of Sohan's passes and stuff. I'm like, oh, dang, because I haven't watched a ton of Sohan because he's not going to be in Dallas's range.
Yeah.
So I'm like, oh, dang, I kind of want to watch more about it. Now I know the hype around this guy. I like this guy.
There you go. So don't just sick him half of us, not all of us.
Yeah.
There you go. That's Kendall Brown. Guys, let us know what you think in the comments below about the Mitchell Robinson situation, the Mavs at center. Who do you want the Mavs to take? What do you think about the Danny Green and number 23 in the draft for the trade exception? Let us know about all that in the comments. You can also find us anywhere you get your podcast. Thanks for making Locked On Mavs your first listen. We mentioned a couple times, but go listen to Locked On NBA Big Board. Rafael Barlow does a great job. We're going to have him on sometime this week to talk about Mavs. He's joined by Richard Stamen, Mavs draft a bunch throughout the next week or so to talk about the draft, mock drafts, player rankings, everything. Locked On NBA Big Board, wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube. Guys, thanks so much for listening to Locked On Mavs.
Peace out.
Boom.